You've been told your golf swing needs work, more lessons, a newer driver, another gadget strapped to your arm, but the fix I found cost about $1 and it fits in your pocket. Here's the part I couldn't believe. A man with only one leg used it to shoot in the 80s. He taught it out of a tiny studio above a store, and the biggest names in the game climbed the stairs just to learn from him. Then it disappeared. I found the first thread inside a water-stained book in a cardboard box at an estate sale outside Toledo, Ohio. A name was written in pencil on the first page, Ernest Jones. By the end of this, you'll know the exact trick he used, and you already own everything you need to try it tonight. Let me take you back to that cardboard box, because that's where this whole thing started for me. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the grass is still wet and half the town is out hunting for bargains on somebody's front lawn. I collect old methods, forgotten ways of doing ordinary things, recipes, repairs, remedies, and yes, the odd bit of buried know-how about sport. Most of what I find is junk. But every so often, a box holds something that stops me cold. This one held golf books. Old ones, cloth covers gone soft at the corners, spines cracked, pages the color of weak tea, and underneath a stack of them was a thin volume with a title that made me pause. Swing the clubhead. That was it. Not hit the ball. Not power through. Swing the clubhead. Written in the pencil on that first page in a shaky older hand were 4 words. It really is this. Now, I've played golf on and off for most of my life, and I've been terrible at it for most of that time. I've bought the clubs, I've taken the lessons, I've watched 100 hours of tips online, and every single one of them made the swing more complicated, not less. Keep your left arm straight, rotate your hips first, shallow the shaft, load into the trail side. It's a language nobody speaks in real life, and it never once made me hit the ball better. So a book from another century that promised the whole secret was just 3 words with a note from a dead man swearing it was real. Well, that got its hooks in me. I paid $2 for the whole box and drove home faster than I should have. But here's what I didn't know yet, and what took me weeks to piece together. The man who wrote that book wasn't some armchair theorist. He had lost most of one leg, and he could still outstrike men with 2 good legs and expensive clubs. That fact alone told me the answer had nothing to do with strength or flexibility or the price of the equipment. It had to be something about the swing itself that we've all forgotten. So I started digging, and the first thing I needed to know was simple. Who was Ernest Jones, and why had I never once heard his name? What I found stopped me. Ernest Jones was a British golf professional born in the 1880s, and by his early 20s he was a rising club professional with a real future in the game. Then came the First World War. In 1916, on the battlefield, he was badly wounded, and surgeons took his right leg off below the knee. Think about that for a moment. A young man whose whole life was built on standing over a ball and moving his body through it, and now he was learning to walk again on a wooden leg. Most men would have hung the clubs on the wall and called it a life. He didn't. Within months of losing the leg, while he was still recovering, he had someone tee up balls for him, and he swung. And here is the number that made me sit down. On one leg, hopping slightly, unable to drive with the lower body the way every teacher tells you that you must, Ernest Jones went out and shot an 83 for 18 holes. 83. There are men who play every weekend of their lives on 2 healthy legs who never break 90. He did it on one leg with an old wooden shaft, not long after coming home from a war that should have ended his golf forever. When I read that, I stopped thinking of this as a quaint old story. I started thinking he had found something the rest of us are missing, because if the swing really depended on the legs, the hips, the power, the mechanics they sell us, that 83 is impossible. It happened. Therefore, the truth about the golf swing has to be something else entirely. So how did he do it? That question kept me up at night. And the answer, once I chased it down, is so simple that I understand exactly why it got buried. Ernest Jones figured out that the golf swing is not something you build out of positions. It's something you feel, and it comes from one place only. The clubhead, he believed, and he could prove it, that if you simply learn to swing the clubhead itself freely, like a weight on the end of a string, your body would organize itself around that motion automatically. The arms, the shoulders, the little bit of leg he had left, all of it fell into place, not because he thought about them, but because they were serving the swing of that clubhead. He wasn't controlling the club. He was letting the club lead. Now stay with me, because this is where the trail almost went cold and where I started to understand why a method this good could vanish so completely. After the war, Jones moved to the United States, and he didn't set up shop at some grand country club with a driving range and a pro shop. He rented a small studio in New York City, first inside a department store, and later his own little space with hitting nets and not much else. He taught indoors, in a room, swinging into canvas, and the people who found their way up those stairs were not beginners. They were some of the finest players and teachers of the day, along with thousands of ordinary men and women who had given up on ever getting better. He was said to have taught tens of thousands of lessons over his career from that modest room. Word of mouth, one relieved golfer at a time, but think about what he was up against even then. A man in a small room telling people the secret was free, that they didn't need more clubs, more strength, more complicated instruction, that the answer fit on the end of a string. That message does not make anyone rich except the golfer who hears it. And this is the part where I have to tell you who benefited from you forgetting all this, because by now you can probably feel it coming. There is an entire industry built on the idea that your swing is broken and only money can fix it. New drivers every single year promising 20 more yards, training aids by the dozen, $30 here, $60 there, straps and sticks and clip-on gizmos, lesson packages, launch monitor sessions. Golf as a business does not profit when you learn that the whole thing comes down to feeling a weight swing on a string. It profits when you stay confused and keep buying the next fix. I'm not saying anyone sat in a room and plotted to erase Ernest Jones. It's quieter than that, and in a way, worse. A simple, free, forgotten method just doesn't have anyone standing behind it, spending money to keep it alive. There's no company selling the swing of the clubhead because you can't patent a feeling. So it faded. The complicated stuff, the stuff with a price tag that got the magazine covers and the television slots and the endless online videos, and a one-legged genius who shot 83 and helped thousands of people finally enjoy the game slipped out of the story. That's the cost of forgetting, not just lost knowledge. Money out of your pocket, year after year, chasing something you already had for $1. So what exactly is the dollar trick? I promised you'd know by the end, and I'm going to give it to you completely, but first I need you to understand why it works. Because if you don't believe why, you won't trust it enough to actually do it. And the why is where old wisdom and modern science shake hands in a way that genuinely surprised me. When you swing a weight on the end of a string, something happens that you cannot fake and cannot force. The weight wants to travel in a smooth arc. If you yank the string, the weight jerks and wobbles and loses its path. If you tighten your grip and try to muscle it, the whole motion falls apart. The only way to make that weight swing in a long, smooth, powerful arc is to stay relaxed, let your hand lead gently, and let the weight do the work at the far end. That is centrifugal force, the same force that keeps water in a bucket when you swing it over your head. And here's the thing, Ernest Jones understood almost 100 years ago that science has only confirmed with instruments in recent decades. A golf club is a weight on the end of a shaft. It is a weight on a string. The exact same law that governs the string governs the club. Fight it, and you lose. Swing it, and it delivers everything. I told you I doubted every method until the evidence proves it, and this one I doubted hardest, because it sounded too easy. So I looked for the modern numbers, And I found them in a study of tempo that a researcher named John Novosel published in the early 2000s in a book called Tour Tempo, which came out in 2004. He and his team took high-speed film of the greatest golfers ever recorded and measured the timing of their swings frame by frame. And they found something almost eerie. Nearly every great player, no matter their height, their build, their era, their style, shared the same ratio between the time it took to swing back and the time it took to swing down. 3-to-1. The backswing took 3 times as long as the downswing. Different bodies, different clubs, different decades, and the same underlying rhythm over and over. Now think about what that means. If the great swing were about positions and muscle and mechanics, you would expect wild variety. Instead, you find one shared rhythm hiding underneath all of them. And what produces a natural, repeatable 3-to-1 rhythm without you even trying to count it? A weight swinging freely on a string. A pendulum has its own timing built in. You don't impose the rhythm. The swinging weight gives it to you. Ernest Jones didn't have a high-speed camera in 1916. He didn't need one. He felt with his hands what those cameras measured almost 90 years later. The clubhead, swung freely, finds the right tempo on its own. That agreement between an old, one-legged pro and a modern film study is the moment I stopped doubting and started practicing. If you want to go deeper into the research behind that idea before we continue, I've put together a digital book available in 3 versions depending on how far you want to take it. Fix First, Deep Fixes, and Full System, where I lay out the full trail of evidence in the same way I'm walking you through it now, with the sources, the test, and the forgotten names behind them. You'll find the link in the description. But for now, let's stay on Ernest Jones, because the question of who he actually was and why his name disappeared is exactly where this story gets strange. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You're thinking this sounds fine for people with time in a backyard and the patience to fiddle with string, but not for you. Maybe your back isn't what it was. Maybe you only get to a course a few times a year. Maybe you've decided you're just not a natural and never will be. I want to talk to you directly for a minute, because this next part is built for exactly the person who assumes it's not for them. You do not need to be athletic. You do not need to be flexible. You do not need to change your clubs, your body, or your schedule. Ernest Jones taught this to elderly beginners, to children, to men who had given up. If a man on one leg can shoot 83 feeling this, you can feel it standing in your kitchen tonight. Here's what you can do today, right now, with things already in your house for nothing. Find a shoelace, or a length of string, or a bit of ribbon about the length of your forearm. Tie something with a little weight to the end of it. A house key works, a heavy washer works, a metal nut from the junk drawer works. Now hold the loose end between your thumb and first finger, let the weight hang down, and just let it swing back and forth like a slow pendulum. Don't grip it, don't force it. Feel how the weight, not your hand, controls the motion. Feel how the moment you tense up, the swing gets ugly, and the moment you relax, it smooths out into a long, easy arc. That feeling, that exact feeling of the weight leading and your hand simply going along for the ride, that is the entire golf swing. That is what Ernest Jones spent his life teaching, and it just cost you nothing. Do that for 2 minutes tonight while the coffee brews. Swing it side to side, swing it back and through the way you would a club. Notice that it naturally wants to spin longer going back and less time coming through. There's your 3-to-1 tempo, showing up in your own hand without you counting a thing. Do it every day for a week, and then pick up a real club and try to make the club head feel the same way, swinging freely, your hands relaxed, the weight at the far end doing the work. I promise you, the first time you feel the club head swing instead of you hitting at the ball, you will understand what I mean. It's like a door opening. Suddenly, the ball just gets in the way of a swing that was going to happen anyway. But a shoelace and a key is my version. The everyman's version I put together from what he described. It works, and I want you to start there. Therefore, I owe you the real thing, the exact tool Ernest Jones actually used in that little New York studio, the demonstration that made grown men who had struggled for decades suddenly stand up straight and say, "Oh, that's all it is." Because when I finally tracked down the precise description of what he did in his own words, it was even simpler and even more brilliant than the string in my hand. And it explains the title of the book and the 4 penciled words. It really is this. Here is what he did. Ernest Jones would take an ordinary pocket knife, a folding jackknife, the kind almost every man carried in his pocket in those days. He would tie one end of a handkerchief to the knife, then he'd hold the free corner of the handkerchief between his fingers, letting the knife hang at the bottom, and he would swing it. That was the whole demonstration, a knife on a handkerchief. He would show a student how, when you try to force the knife, the handkerchief goes limp and crumples, and the knife has no life. But when you simply swing, letting the weight of the knife pull the cloth tight, the handkerchief straightens into a taut line, and the knife whips around in a beautiful, powerful arc. The tight handkerchief was the extended arms and shaft, the knife was the club head, and the lesson landed in a way no amount of talking about hip rotation ever could. You do not create the swing, you free the weight, and the weight creates the swing. He described it plainly in his writing, and the core of it appears right there in the book that came out under the title Swing the Club Head, along with his earlier work from the 1930s. His whole teaching, tens of thousands of lessons, boiled down to a handkerchief and a knife and the feeling they gave you. The reason it works is the same reason my shoelace works, only better, because the cloth shows your eye what your hand is feeling. When the cloth is tight, the swing is right. When the cloth collapses, you're hitting instead of swinging. You get instant, honest feedback, and it costs you a handkerchief and a folding knife you probably already own. Call it $1, and you've overpaid. So try it his way once you've got the feel from the string. Tie a light knife or a spoon or any small weight to a handkerchief or a dish towel and swing it. Watch the cloth. Chase the feeling of that cloth pulling tight all the way through. Then carry that exact sensation to the club. Relaxed hands. The club head is the knife. Your arms and the shaft are the handkerchief. Let the weight at the end lead, and let the tightness tell you the truth. This is the thing the note in pencil was talking about. It really is this. A man who lost his leg in a war figured out that everything the rest of us were told to build and buy and grind for was already sitting in our pocket, waiting to be swung. And once you feel it, you start to see how much of the noise around this game exists only to make you forget. 20 more yards from a new driver, they say, for $500. But the longest, purest strikes come from tempo and a freely swinging club head, which is free. A rescue club for your weak spot, another $200. But the weak spot was almost always a golfer trying to hit hard with tight hands, fighting the very weight that wanted to help. Ernest Jones proved it in a room with a handkerchief, decades before the marketing existed, and he proved it on one leg, which knocks the legs right out from under every excuse the rest of us hide behind. I want to be honest with you about my own testing because I don't ask you to trust anything I haven't done myself. I spent a full month on this. First, the shoelace and the key, 2 minutes a day. In the kitchen, feeling like a fool. Then the handkerchief and the knife, watching that cloth go tight and slack, until I could feel the difference with my eyes closed. Then I took it to the range with a bucket of balls. The first dozen were a mess because my hands didn't want to let go of control. They never do. But somewhere in that bucket, it happened. I stopped hitting at the ball and started swinging the club head through where the ball happened to be sitting. The strike felt like nothing, and the ball went farther and straighter than my hardest, ugliest lash. That was the moment the penciled note stopped being a curiosity and became the truest thing anyone ever told me about this game. And the beauty of it, the part that I think Ernest Jones understood in his bones because of what he'd been through, is that this method does not age out of you. You can lose a step, you can lose flexibility, you can lose the strength you had at 40, but you never lose the ability to relax your hands and let a weight swing. He didn't have a right leg and he shot 83. What's your excuse and what's mine? The method was built by a man who had every reason to quit, and it survives precisely because it asks so little of the body and so much of one simple idea. Stop hitting, start swinging, let the weight lead. So that's the trail from a $2 cardboard box at an estate sale outside Toledo, through the mud of a First World War battlefield, up a narrow staircase into a New York studio, and back out again through a high-speed camera study that measured what a one-legged man already knew by feel. The knowledge existed. Someone let it fade, because there was no money in a truth this simple. A handful of old books and a few stubborn teachers kept it alive on dusty shelves. I chased it down and tested it until I trusted it. And now it's yours, tonight, for the price of a shoelace and a key, or a handkerchief and a pocket knife. Here's the feeling I want you to hold on to after this. You were never as far from a good golf swing as they made you believe. It was never locked behind the next purchase. It was sitting in your pocket the whole time, and someone was quietly counting on you never to reach in and find it. Recovering that, taking back a thing that was always yours, that's worth more than 20 yards off any driver on the shelf. You're the kind of person who would rather know the real reason a thing works than be sold a fancy version of it. That's why you made it all the way here. Now, I want to hear from you. So do me a favor and actually leave a comment, because this audience is far too quiet for how much you all know. Tell me this. When you swing the weight on the string tonight, does it naturally spin longer going back than coming through, the way it does for me? Try it and write yes or no in the comments. I read them and I answer. And if you believe, like I do, that the best knowledge is the kind they can't sell you, then come along with me, because this channel is a small and growing crowd of people quietly digging up what convenience culture buried and hoped we'd forget. Subscribe and stand with us. My next hunt is already underway, and it's about a forgotten kitchen method from an old farmhouse manual that keeps bread fresh for weeks without a single preservative, and the reason it works has nothing to do with the freezer. I found the first clue in the margin of a book older than my grandmother. But that, my friend, is a mystery for next time. Before you go, one last thing. This video showed you where the trick came from, but inside the Always Almanac, I walk you through Ernest Jones's full clubhead method, drill by drill. And if something isn't clear, you can ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime with one click. Come join me.